So how do we like my joke yesterday, guys? Thanks, Ellie. I got some more jokes for you guys. This one's like popcorn style. So I'm gonna ask different people different jokes. Okay? And also I'm not gonna address anyone by name, so that way it seems like I don't know anyone's name. Um you guys in the front row, you're on an airplane with 500 bricks and the airplane is crashing because it's too heavy. So you throw one brick out. How many bricks are on the airplane? That's correct, 499. In the second row here, how do you fit an elephant in a refrigerator? That's right, you open the door, you put the elephant in, and then you close the door. In the third row, well, they're not like really numbered, but like up here in the orange jacket, how do you fit a giraffe in a refrigerator? So close. You got to open the door, take the elephant out, put the giraffe in, then close the door. Over here, the Lion King is having a meeting and all of the animals are there except for one animal. What animal's not there? The giraffe, because it's in the refrigerator. Let's go to this other side now. How do you cross a river infested with crocodiles with no boat, no tools, and no bridge? You just swim across because all the alligators are at the Lion King's meeting. But when you get to the other side, guys, you die anyways. Why? Because some idiot threw a brick out of an airplane. You had to put the laugh sound effect there, Skippy. It would have been a lot funnier that way, I think. All right, thank you guys. Y'all have been a great audience. That's all for today. Do we clean up the spill? Okay. But like, what if I slipped? That would actually. What?
Never mind. Never mind. So sorry that you guys are hearing me yap a lot today. But we're going to be talking about our backend now. Yeah. Wait, I start this actually. So the goal for today is to start creating posts that are persistent even after we refresh our Capbook page. If we look right now at our, we go to workshop 3 starter, or actually the end of workshop 2. Yeah. And do npm run dev. If we post anything and refresh, it just disappears. And the same functionality happens with comments. Why no work? I think it's
We should blame Stanley.
Stanley Zhao. Anyways, I think it's because we're in this wrong step. But if we go to weblab.mit/example, you can see that you can see everyone's posts, and they're actually saved permanently using databases. So we're going to get into that a little bit later on. But for now, we just want to have our posts save upon refresh. So currently, we actually have all of our stories and comments stored in the front end, right? Inside of our React files that we give to our client, we also give the hard-coded data that we want to display. But today, we want to move those comments and posts to our backend. And again, how does the front end get this data from the back end? Yell it with me, guys. HTTP request. Yay! So the front end is going to be like, oh yeah, please give me the stories, please. Response will be the stories. So we can see, well, I mean, I showed you guys this request earlier, so we can just skip that for now. And we need a way to send requests to our server. So we send a HTTP request through JavaScript. And these are the helper functions that we created for you guys. And yeah, we just abstracted it out. So very easy to use. So now let's get started. I want you guys to get reset hard, get fetch, and get checkout W3 step 1. So as I mentioned in my previous lecture, we can run our server using npm run start or npm start. And please use 2 terminals so we can also run the front end. And I showed you guys the test endpoint earlier. So here's today's agenda. We're first going to move our stories and comments to the backend. Then we're going to create a GET request and GET endpoint for these stories. Then we're going to make a POST request to add new stories. So this will be both POST request and POST endpoint. Then we're going to do the same kind of functionality for comments, and you guys will mainly be implementing those so you guys get more experience. And then we're going to be implementing route middleware, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So step 1, we have to move our stories to the backend and get them. So we currently have our stories hard-coded in feed.jsx. I can pull that up right now. Feed.jsx is the page. Exit out everything else. Okay. Ew. Okay. So we have our stories. And these are a little bit different from the stories that Skippy made earlier. But they are stored in the same way with hard-coded stories. And we want to move these to the backend. So I know I'm trying to hammer it in a lot, that difference between front end and back end, but it's very useful to know, especially for debugging. So we want to move all this data to our server.js file. So we see our server here, pull it up. And we just copy and paste this information to the backend. And we can really just put them anywhere. Let's see if I can clean this up a bit. Just call it stories for now. Hooray! Now we have all the data in the backend. Now we have to actually request it. So we're gonna have like this kind of front end, back end diagram in the bottom right corner, so you guys know what we're currently working on. But before we get into that, let's try to like think about how this HTTP request would be structured. So talk to your neighbors, turn around, have someone to talk to, and think about what request method we're going to be using, what request URL, the status code of the response, and hopefully what a response body will be for this example here. outlets. All right. Anybody have an idea? Oh yeah. Is it? Oh, okay. So the request method, if we're trying to get comments, stories, posts. We can say it together, guys. 1, 2, 3, get. All right. For the request URL, since we're sending requests to the backend, what port localhost would we be using? Say it together, guys. 3, 2, 1. 5,000, 3,000. Dang. So again, front end 5173, back end 3000. And then our response is going to look like this since we're just requesting our posts. So hopefully we get them correctly. So now we're actually going to send a request from our front end. So we're going to be using our get helper function that we declared for you earlier. And so I want you guys to think about, if we're sending a request to API/stories, do we have to pass in any parameters? And what kind of functionality do we have to use inside of .then? So we haven't implemented the endpoint, the functionality in the server yet, but since this is like a design kind of problem, like what do you think, what information do you think we should give to our server? So you guys can, you guys can try implementing this, searching up step 1 in your VS Code. All right. Now that I've given you guys some time, I'm going to live code it with you guys. So our first question is, where do we want to represent these stories inside our front end? Since we're displaying them in our feed component, we'll probably want to do a request inside of feed.jsx. So we can do get, and you can see that we imported get and post from utilities up here. Get slash API slash, and what endpoint are we using? We can define it here. We can just say stories. And then once we do that, we want to run the callback function inside of our .then. So here, our .then is just receiving all the stories from our backend. So stories. And then we just want to set these stories as the front end state. And so that's all for now. We can't really display this functionality yet since we don't have functionality on the back end. So that's our next step. Oh, and I forgot to reverse them. Really? So any questions about this real quick? Where? Yeah. Yeah, so use effect, we essentially want to run this whenever certain variables or certain state changes. So you can imagine that maybe our front end has some state and we want the rendered, what our user sees to reflect that change state. So we would run some kind of functionality whenever some other variables change. Here we only run our get request whenever we refresh, so on the first mount I mean. And so you can imagine that every time we refresh, we want to get all the new stories that everyone has posted. Is that sufficient? Nice. All right, cool. Let's move on. Oops. So now we want to write an API endpoint to actually retrieve the stories to our front end. So we're on our back end, and from our API/test endpoint, we receive our request and response object inside of our callback function, and then we just send back our message using res.send. So we're going to be doing something similar, but just for some kind of context, the kind of parameters or attributes that we can access from request are request query and request body, where request query would be like the function parameters if we have a get request, and then the request body would be what information we want to post to our backend. And our response object can send back data. So either we send back the data that is requested, and we send the status code of our response. So maybe if we error it out on our backend, we'd want to send a 500 status code. So what does our route need to do? It just needs to send back all the stories to the front end. And so how do we access all these stories? Well, we just moved our stories to our backend inside of our stories variable. So I'll give you guys a second to think about this, but it should be a very simple implementation. For the sake of time, we're going to move on. So as I mentioned in my previous lecture, we can create endpoints by using app.get. So for step 1, we have our server app, and we want to instantiate endpoint / API / stories, since that's what we requested from in our front end. We get a request and a response. And then we just send back those stories inside of our response object. So it's as simple as that, since the functionality is very simple itself. All right. Now let's actually make sure that this works. So if you guys pull up your terminal, run npm start, npm run dev. No. So we check our localhost. It seems the same, but if we go to our network tab and go to network and refresh, all the bottom, we see that we actually make an API request for our stories. So yay, we did it. So now to get on the same page, please git reset hard and check out W3 step 2. All right. So now it doesn't make sense to be able to get our stories if we can't post them. So now we're going to want to have an endpoint to post stories into the backend. So we'll be using rec.body mainly for passing in our stories. But the object that we pass into rec.body, or I mean, we use the post handler function that I showed you guys earlier, and we can pass in any kind of like JSON object into it. Those JSON objects, like those attributes, can be accessed on the backend, and you can just do something like rec.body.content if I add a JSON object with attribute content. We'll show you guys. So our second to do is our API / story endpoint. So we're going to be sending a post, and it's going to be a post onto the backend. And usually, whenever we post data onto the backend, we want some kind of confirmation that it actually was posted, was actually stored. And so in the response, we usually send back the post. And so work with your group to fill in the blanks of this HTTP request. And this is for posting a story onto our backend. While they're what? Okay. right, guys. We can do the request method. So 3, 2, 1. Post. Request URL. 3, 2, 1. Localhost 3000 /API /post story. Sorry, guys. Request body. It's going to be the story that we're posting. And our status code 200, and the response body is going to be the same story that we posted as confirmation. So as I mentioned earlier, we can pass in an object into our post function by just passing in that JSON object with the content attribute. So then on the back end, we can just access that value however we'd like. So now we do we have enough time? We have 1 minute to implement the post endpoint. So maybe we'll leave that till after lunch. Yeah, so Calvin will continue his comedy routine for you.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, you guys are they're free to get lunch now, right? Because it's 12:30. Is it set up? Waymond? I know you guys are so hungry and you're only here for lunch, and then it'll be 1 p.m. and then there'll be like 3 people in lecture hall, but that's okay. Guys, what if I agree to tell you another joke at the end of lecture if you stay? Record low attendance. You have a joke? It's a good one? Uh-huh. Oh, 1 burrito per person, please. It's Chipotle. You should share that joke with me later so I can retell it to everyone and pretend like it was my own joke. Oh shoot, the mic was on for that. So one day there was a guy named Sam, and he really enjoyed the musical arts, specifically choir. So he joined his local choir, where he would sing every day, and he wasn't that good at singing, but he really enjoyed it. So every day he would go to this choir and he would practice, and he started getting a little bit good, but nothing crazy. But one day, on his 18th birthday, Sam was in the choir, and all of a sudden, just in the middle of a song, he sang the most beautiful note that anyone had ever heard. And everyone was impressed because Sam wasn't that good. But this note was so magical that everyone just stopped singing to listen to this musical note. Skippy. No. So Sam tried to recreate it, but he just couldn't. So everyone just kind of ignored it until the next year. And the next year rolls around, and on Sam's 19th birthday, he sings another beautiful, golden, magical note. And everyone is awestruck. They're stunned because, again, he's just a pretty mediocre singer, so no one knows how he did this. So the next year rolls around, and at this point, it's Sam's 20th birthday, and everyone in the town is coming to watch him sing this magical golden note. So, as everyone expects, on his 20th birthday, he does successfully sing this beautiful note, and everyone is awestruck. So word gets around, and eventually, it gets to Sam's 24th birthday, and this magical golden note is going to be televised. They have a whole church choir to back up Sam. They have an orchestra. Everyone is so excited to hear it. It's televised across the entire world. So Sam starts singing the song, and in the middle of the song, all of a sudden, he hits the beautiful, magical golden note, and everyone watching on television is awestruck because they've never heard something so beautiful in their entire lives. And just as soon as it started, the note ends, and all of a sudden, he spontaneously combusts. Everyone's horrified. Everyone's horrified. They're shocked. How could this have happened? They ask the choir director, and he says, "Oh, well, isn't it obvious? Samsung Note 7." Those of you that missed the punchline, Samsung Note 7.
Right. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed lunch. So where we left off was we were creating our post endpoint for posting a story. So last time we created the request and then created the endpoint. Now we're creating the endpoint and then creating the request, just to show you how flexible it is with creating API requests and endpoints. You could, whatever order you choose is fine. So if we go to server.js, we want to create post endpoint. So we do app.post, and our endpoint's gonna be API/story, not post. That was very embarrassing when I did that. And the callback function, once this API endpoint is reached, is well, we want to receive our story from the request. So our posted story is going to be equal to rec dot, and we can really define it however we'd like. I'd say we're passing in an object with a story attribute. Now that we have our story, we can just append that to stories. So we do stories dot push posted story. Oops. Okay, cool. So now we updated our server, but we want to confirm that we actually updated our stories. So we do res.send, posted story, and we're done. And we can look at the solution here. I should put rec.body, so maybe we'll just pass in the object as that. Any questions? Yeah. Where does the what statement go to? Your front end. So if we want to like create a post request, we're going to automatically return a promise, and that promise is going to resolve eventually to the posted story. So we can later on, yeah, I can show you right now what we're going to do with that. Yeah, good question. Anybody else? All right, cool. So now we actually have to do a post request on the front end side. So we want to send a post request to API/story. Again, this is in the front end. So we need to find out where we're actually going to be posting this. So if we keep on going to the slides, actually, you should think about what we want to send through the post request as a parameter. We name it as parameter or params, but I feel like it'd be more appropriate if we named it body. But essentially, with the object that we're sending through params is going to be our story itself. Oops. And so we Control F, step 2. We want to, once we call our callback function add new story, we want to send an API request to our server. So we have our, actually, I'll let you guys think for a second. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself about what kind or what our post request is going to look like right here. So I'll give you guys a minute to think about it. Please talk to the people around you, and then give me like a, raise your hand whenever you guys are ready to move on. All right, we're going to be moving on now. So I'll be live coding this. Once we call our add new story function, and we can see what this is called. All right, we pass this down as props for new story. And so whenever we click our submit button, we call add story. And inside of add story, we call our props add new story. And so up here, we'd want to do a post request to /API/ and what did we define it as? We defined it as API/story. And this is going to require us to put in our story, right? So value itself is going to be the value that we're passing in. And this is going to represent our story. And then this is immediately going to return a promise. And the value of that promise is going to be the post itself. So whenever we run our callback function, we can just reuse this return story, so confirmation story. We can set our state to be our current stories with our confirmation story at the beginning. So you can see that if our post fails, then we're most likely not going to change. We're not going to change our state, right? So we won't see that modification in the front end, and this just ensures that our front end correctly represents what's on the server. Yeah. We can if we'd like to. So if we wanted to, we just put .catch, and then we have our error. And then since we aren't really, we can probably put something into our console. So it'd be like, oh, didn't correctly post story in backend. So we can do something like that if we'd like to, for like debugging purposes. That's a good question. Anybody else? Right. Cool. And so we can try testing this out. So I can do, everything is automatically updated. So let's see, npm run dev. npm run dev. And so if I'm like, hi everybody, I can post it. And then if I refresh, it stays there. So yeah, we moved our stories to the backend, we requested them, and now we can actually post them. So now I'm going to be handing it off to Calvin, and he'll do the same kind of process with comments, and hopefully you guys have kind of reference with our API endpoints for stories that you guys can just implement it on your own.
Have no fear, your goat is here. Not to say that Luke is not your goat. We're both goats. Alright, sorry guys. That was terrible. Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page, of course, we're going to git checkout or git reset hard, and then git checkout workshop step 3 here. Okay, so I don't know why this wasn't on the slide before, but this is what we just did, testing adding our story. And you guys might notice that although you can add stories successfully, if you try to post a comment, those comments don't persist. And that's because comments are stored separately from our stories. So to just review steps 1 through 2, here we have our get requests for our stories, which asks for just all of the stories, and our backend sends all of the stories. And here we have our post request for the stories, which requests to post a story to the backend, and the server then responds with the same story that we just posted as just a confirmation that everything is working properly and we did in fact post our story. So the next thing that we're going to do is a get endpoint for /API/comments. And this should look really similar to how we implemented our stories, where, of course, the first step is going to be moving our stuff to the backend, because currently our comments are hard-coded in card.jsx, and it should be stored in our backend instead. So this means that, sorry, any modifications to the comments on the front end are local and will not persist when we reset the page because they are hard-coded. So to move the data over to the server, this is going to be a super complicated process in which we copy and paste it from card.jsx into our server. So we see here we have card.jsx, and then here we have our hard-coded comments. So we're just going to Control X, and we go into server here. And we're just going to Control V them here, and then indent everything properly. And here we're just going to call this comments instead of hard-coded comments. Okay, and that's actually all we have to do to move the data over to our server. Now that in the backend, we actually have to write our requests to get the comments from the backend. So just a quick refresher on what our HTTP requests are going to be. We have our query and rec.query.content to actually access the fields of our query. So you can see here, if we format it like this, then like where our query is a JSON object, then we can do rec.query.content to access it on our backend. And also you can see the query is actually part of the URL that we send when we do a GET request. All right, so next up, we're going to actually make the request to the endpoint. So this should look something like this. We request the comments under a specific story, because that way we can just send a request for each story to the backend to get the comments under that one story. And we don't have to do our .filter function on the front end. We can do it on the back end instead. So real quick, this is going to be just a standard, actually, I'm going to have you guys fill this out. What the request method, the URL should look like, the status code, and the response body. So turn and talk to your groups. Guys, I'm hearing zero talking going on. Here, I'm going to turn around. So I don't know if you're talking or not, but turn and talk to your groups what each of these fields should be. All right, let's come back together now to review these. So the request method is, of course, going to be get, because we're just trying to get our comments. We're not trying to post one. The URL is going to be localhost 3000 / and then it's going to be the query params, actually. Real quick, does anyone want to volunteer what query param should we have if we're getting the comments under a specific post? Yes? Yeah, the story ID or the parent ID of the story that we're getting the comments under. And of course, the response should be the status code 200, and the response body should just be all of the comments, or the comments list. So I'll leave this up here for you guys to look at. All right, and now it's time to make our GET request. So this says live coding, but I do want you guys to, I do want you guys to try and implement this yourself. Feel free to look in feed.jsx and see how we format our GET requests for the stories, and then feel free to implement that in card.jsx. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. So remember, we're going to be working in card.jsx, and here in step 3, this use effect is going to be on mount. We want to send that GET request to the server. All right, how are we looking on time? Let's get hands up if we think we need a little bit more time here. Seeing some hands up, so I'll give us 30 more seconds. Alrighty, we're gonna come back together right now to go ahead and implement this. So the first thing that we're gonna have here is our GET request on the page, and that GET request is going to be to the endpoint /API/comments, and the actual params of that is going to be a parent with an ID of the props.id. Because remember, the card has the ID of the story that we're trying to get all of the comments under. Okay. So in our .then of this, we are going to have our callback function, and this should have returned our story objects, our comment objects, like this. And all we're going to do is set our comments to our comments objects, like so, and we can delete this. And we should put our semicolons here. So this is actually all we have to do for formatting our GET requests. And notice how we did not have to do our .filter. And the reason for that is because we should only be getting back the comments under our post, so there's no need to filter anymore. So next up, we're going to make our actual endpoint, because if you were to try this code, then it would just throw an error and be very mad at you because we haven't implemented our endpoint. So that's going to be in our server. Oh, sorry. Wait. Yeah, okay. So notice how we include the parent stories ID prop when we made the get request from the front end. So be thinking about how we can access this query param that we passed in when we write it on the back end. So here, it's the rec.query.parent. So the steps for this is going to be figure out what story we need to get the comments from, and then filter out only the comments that are the children of this story, and then actually send back those comments to the front end. Oh, yeah, okay. Now it is your turn to go ahead and implement this. So this is going to be in server.jsx, and it's going to be step 3. And feel free to look at this code for how we actually format these endpoints. And I'll give you guys 3 or 4. Oh, yeah, question. Yeah, so it's mainly just a formatting or a styling thing. Query is usually where the content is in a get request, and body is usually where the content is in a post request. But like functionally, you could like put all of your data in the body or in the query. Um, it's usually just a styling thing. Good question. Mhm. So if you actually look at the way that we implemented our helper functions, which I believe is in utilities.js right here, we have our get and post, and you can like look at these more in depth. But whenever you're using these functions that we provided, if it's a get request, it will always be in the query, and if it's a post request, it'll always be in the body. Um, yeah, so like if you wanted to put the stuff separately, then you could like look at the documentation for JavaScript's built-in fetch and do it yourself. But for now, it's just automatic. Yeah. All right, I'll give you guys 3 minutes here. And I forgot to mention this, but if you guys ever think you really need help, please feel free to ask questions in the questions doc or put yourself in queue for individual help. All right, how are we looking on time? Who raise your hand if you need a few more seconds here? Okay, looking like a lot of people, so we're gonna give you guys like a couple 2-3 seconds. All right, let's come back together now and implement this endpoint on our backend after I finish this bite. So, like I said before, we can reference this right here, our get request, and we can just actually put that right here and then change, instead of slash stories, there's going to be slash comments, and we should send our filtered comments. So let's just create a new variable for our filtered comments. Let's call this filtered comments, and we'll set this to comments dot filter, and our filter, remember, takes in a callback function. So this is going to be comment, and this should return whether or not the comment dot parent is the same, and we need to use triple equals because we're comparing strings in JavaScript. So we need to check if the comment dot parent is equal to the request dot query dot parent, like so. So this will create our filtered comments, and we can actually just send our filtered comments back as our response. And now if we go to our local host, and then we reload, we can see that our comments are now appearing. And if we go to our inspect element and network, and then we reload our page, we can actually see that it's making these API requests to our backend and is returning our comments. So here, under this post, there are no comments. So you see it's just returning an empty list. And under this post, there are 2 comments, so it's returning both of those. Okay, I'll leave the... Oh, sorry guys. I should have left these hints up for you while you were working on it. That's my bad. But I'll leave this solution code up here on the screen for you guys to just think about for a bit. All right. So you guys should still be running your npm start and your npm run dev in your 2 separate terminals, and you should be able to test this locally. Remember, if you're having any trouble at all, please feel free to put yourself in queue or ask a question on the questions doc. So now we're going to implement the post request for the comments. So just to make sure we're on the same page, everyone should git reset hard and check out step 4. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to get there. Right, so now we're going to be implementing our post endpoint for /API/comment to actually post comments from the front end. Because currently, if you go to what we have right now, we can post comments, but they just stay on the front end. And when we reload the site, they disappear, which isn't very helpful. So right now, we're going to be working on the request to the backend, which is asking to post a comment under a specific story. So in groups, I want you guys to, again, fill out the request method, URL, the body, and for the response, the status code and the body of the response. So turn and talk. I'll turn around so you guys don't get shy or something. And talk with a partner about what the field should be here. Don't make me tell another joke to fill the silence. Ha ha ha. Guys, I think I've given you enough time. So of course, the request method, I did say we are going to be posting comments, so that should be a clue that it's going to be a post request. The URL is just going to be to our endpoint, localhost 3000 /API /comment. And the request body can actually just be the entire comment itself. Because remember, comment objects have a parent field. So if we put this in the body, then we can just look at the request body to figure out like every bit of info that we need to put it in the comments list. And of course, the status code should be 200, and the response body can just be the comment itself that we just posted. So I'll leave this up on the screen for a few seconds. All right. So we already have our comments in our backend, and if we want to make a new comment on the backend, then we need both our post endpoint and our post request. So as this is gonna be a post request, we're gonna be using the rec.body. So if you want to like get some certain info, you would use rec.body.content as opposed to rec.query.content. And what that looks like is something like this on the front end and back end. So I'll leave this up on the screen for you guys to review for a little bit. You can see here that this is how we would format the post request on the front end, and this is how we would actually access that content on the back end. All right, so now it's time to actually do our comments post endpoint. So we're going to start off by making the request from the front end. Remember, we're going to be sending this through rec.body because it's a post request, and we want to send the comment that we plan on posting. So the new comment data is already passed through the function add new comment in card.jsx. So you should make our post request inside of this add new comment callback function. So if we go to card.jsx, go to add new comment here, you can see in step 4, this is where we should be making our post request. So it's your turn. You should be sending the post request to /API/comment. Oh, my bad. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to make this post request and format it. How are we looking on time? Give me thumbs up if we're done, thumbs down if we need some more time. Okay, I'll give us a couple more seconds here. Alrighty, we're gonna go back together now and implement this post request together. So remember, we're going to be putting it in here in our add new comment callback function, and our comment is actually already going to be formatted exactly like a body would be formatted of our post request. So what we can do is we can make our post request to /API/comment, and for our body of this, we can actually just make it the comment itself. And of course, this should return our comment that we just posted. So we can make our dot then to take in our posted comment. And with our posted comment, it should actually just do the same thing that it was doing. The key here is that we only want to append our posted comment. So if something goes wrong, then we should not display it, right? Because we don't want to display something that doesn't accurately reflect the server. So if I go to our solution here, then we can see that it's pretty much the same thing. I just called it posted comment, and our solution calls it comment obj. And you can see that it's fine to set our comment as the body of our request. So now we actually want to make our endpoint for the post request. And this should be very similar to how we made our endpoint for our stories, because we're just going to append it to the end of our comments list in server.js. So it's your turn to handle the post route or the post endpoint on the backend. So that's going to be in server. And it's going to be right here on line 87-ish. I'll give you guys 3 minutes for this. How are we looking on time? Let's give thumbs up if we're done, thumbs down if we need some more time. All right, it's looking like people have got this. And I guess it makes sense because it is really just copying almost exactly how we posted our story. So we can just do this here, app.post, but instead of /story, it's going to be /comment. And this should instead be new comment. And of course, this is the rec.body. And we are going to push our new comment. And we're going to send back our new comment. Excuse me. Sorry, I forgot to put the hints up. But yeah, this is exactly like we did for story. And I think my code here is actually the exact same as the solution. So now let's just test that everything is working. You guys can see if we go here, our website looks exactly the same, but actually it is now running brand new. Sorry about that. It's now running brand new fetch and post and get requests under the hood. So we can respond to this post, I like cats, me too. And if we post this comment and we look at our network tab, we can actually see this post request to comments. And we can see that posted. If we refresh our website, sorry guys, I think that my issue here is that I was appending it to the stories. This should be appending it to the comments, like so. Now if we reload the page and we respond, me too, and then we refresh, now our comment is persisting even when we refresh the page. And that's because it's now all on our backend. Isn't that lovely? So just to review steps 3 through 4, we made our get requests, which are getting the comments under a specific post and returning all of those comments in a list. And that looks something like this, where it's going to /API/comments with the query param being the parent. And then we, of course, have our post requests, which just post our comments by appending them to the list of all comments. And that looks something like this, where our comment data is actually in the body of the request. Do you have a question? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the query and the body sections of the request are both going to be JSON objects or JavaScript objects. So because comment itself, if we go to card.jsx here, because comment itself should already be a JavaScript object, when we send this request, what we're basically doing is we're saying that the body of this request is going to be a JavaScript object matching the comment that we're trying to post. So that's why we don't need to put the curly braces around it and format it. If we wanted to make it a little bit more clear, then we could say like body here is our new JavaScript object, and then we say that like ID is equal to comment.id, and we could say like content, I think is the next one, is comment.content. I misspelled ID here. And we could say that creator name is the comment.creator name. And what's the last one? Parent is equal to comment.parent, like so. And then we could say that this is the body here. And then we need a semicolon there. And this should work the exact same. So if we reload our page and we post a comment here, this is still working exactly the same, except now it's just a little bit more obvious that we're saying that this is the body of the request, right? But since this is just copying the comment object, this is a lot more concise code, so we don't need this. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? That's a really good question. So again, we abstracted the get and post requests, I think in utilities here. So you can see here, if you just use our get function, then the params that you put in will automatically be the query params. You see we format it here when we send it to the endpoint. So I think that we did it in feed here to get the, no, we do it here, yeah, to get the comments. So what we do here is we create a JavaScript object which has the parent property being the ID of the card. So that's the story ID. And this is just a JavaScript object that just looks like this. And then we send that over as the query params. And then in server, when we actually receive that request, that's going to be under rec.query dot, and then rect.query is actually just going to be the exact object that we passed in here. So we can do just dot parent, and that's how we get it. Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Hopefully that also cleared things up for some of you as well. All right. Unfortunately, our server.js file is getting a little bit crowded, and it'll only keep getting more crowded as we add more and more API endpoints. So it would be really nice if we could organize this into a different file. And the way that we do that is with something called middleware, specifically a router. And there are so many things called routers. Like we have our router on our front end, which is our React DOM router. But then we also have a router on the back end, which basically just forwards API requests to some other application, to some other part of the program to handle them. So if we do something like this, const router equals express.router, this creates an object that can handle routes, just like const app equals express. And to use it, we can require it in our main server.js file. And if we do something like this, app.use/API router, then this routes all requests to /API/ to our router. And it'll make more sense once we go ahead and implement it in code. But now we're going to do some backend endpoint routing. So the difference between app and router is that app is just the overall server, whereas router is just an isolated group of specific API endpoints, and it's kind of like a mini application. The main reason that we use routers is for organization, because it lets us put our endpoints into a different file, and modularity, because we can structure endpoints in isolation without really having to worry about the logic of our server or our other endpoints. So just to reiterate, the main reason for using router is just making our code more readable and easy for us to understand. It doesn't improve server performance or anything. It's just really good coding practice. So let's actually move our endpoints from server.js to our router in api.js. So just real quick, to make sure we're all on the same page, make sure to get reset hard and check out step 5. So you'll now see that we have another file in our server folder, which is api.js. So we want to move our endpoints to api.js, and then we want to write our code to actually route those paths to the new location that they're at. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to get reset and check out to step 5. All right, so we've already made our new file for you guys, which is api.js. And the next step, and it's in the /server directory. So you guys should see it right next to server.js. So next we actually have to define our router for /API in api.js. So this is just going to be a line of code here that looks like this. And you guys should just be following along for this. I don't expect you to know all of this off the bat, but it'll be good to have this in your own projects as well. So it's just going to be a line of code here. Like this. So this just defines a router that will take our API endpoints. Then we actually need to export the router so that our other files can use it. And also, like, if you guys are ever wondering how we all know what to do, it's because of the documentation. You guys can look it up here. I believe that weblab.is/slides, you should be able to find this PowerPoint, and that's how you can click on the link. All right, so next we actually have to define our middleware, which routes our API paths prefixed with /API to actually point to this file. So the way that we do this is in server.js. We're going to import our router. So if I open up server.js here, and we go to, where is it? I'm not sure if it's here, so we're just going to put it here. around line 20. And that will be something like this. So this is just how you import things on the server side. And then we actually have to connect our API.js to the main server. So that is just with one line of code that looks like app.use, and that's going to be all paths prefixed with /API. I can't spell today. /API, and that should just use our API router. And now the last thing for us to do is to move all of our endpoints that we defined in steps 1 through 4 to api.js. So that is going to be here, and we can just take all of this and copy it, and then put those over here in api.js. And then the last thing is that instead of app.post and app.get, we're instead going to be doing router.post and router.get. So by the way, a little VS Code tip, on Windows you can use Alt. On Mac I think it's Option, but if you Alt click on multiple lines, then it lets you edit all of those lines at the same time. Like so, and now you can see I edited all of the lines. Very useful tool, highly recommend it. And then we can also remove our prefixes /API, because all of these prefixes, oh wait, sorry, I was holding the wrong button. Because all these prefixes are implied when we defined our middleware. Like so. Okay, and I'll leave this up for you guys to just catch up, because I know this was a little bit fast, so it's okay if you got lost. The important thing is that you know how to look back at these slides and move all of your endpoints to a different file for your own projects. Okay. So finally, one last test. If we do our npm run and our npm start, it should have been automatic because Lucas has autosave here. But now if we reload our site and we make some posts here, these are all working as intended. Let me reload. They're all there. Okay. That is all for lecture for this workshop. Next up, we have UI and Figma from Kat, but please be sure to leave feedback at weblab.is/feedback. Oh yes, questions. Great question, because I was also confused about this. So they're actually just stored in this line right here. It's a local variable on the backend called comments, that is always accessible. And it's a local variable called stories on the back end. So that's why when like you restart the server, or when I make any changes to the server, that's why they disappear, because it's restarting the server, which is reinitializing the stories and comments. Yeah, exactly. So I think, what is it? Yeah, so you see here we have our terminal that's running our npm start. This is just keeping track of our state. And anytime you make a change, it refreshes. But even if like we close out of the browser, our backend is still running in this terminal. Yeah, it would lose all of our comments. And we'll get to our databases lectures and workshops, which is how you actually keep your data after your server restarts. But all right. Yeah, question? Yeah, really great question. So constant just means that you can't reassign it. So if you like, I don't know if you've taken 6 10 10 or I forget what the old course code 6042. No, 009. Yeah, 009. Then you might be familiar with environment diagrams, but const basically just means that you never reassign that pointer. So stories is actually just like pointing to an array object, and you can change and modify that array object. And that's actually how you modify states on the front end as well. Because comments and set comments, these are both constant, but you can change the actual value where they are pointing to. You just can't reassign them. Yeah, good question. Any more? All right. I believe it's Kat's turn for UI and Figma. Kat and Raymond.